All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our TechStrong, Media Ops, TechStrong, DevOps.com. You guys have seen the news, new branding, loving it for TechStrong. New webinar here with Red Hat and Sumo Logic on observability-driven design. Next slide, please. What we're talking about today are modern applications, and building these applications to provide flexibility and portability presents a challenge across that landscape. One of the things that you can do to help get rid of that is to think about an observable system. And to do that means you got to design that in. So in this session, we're going to talk about the principles and the underlying use cases around adopting open standards and tool chains, shifting left the activities required for observability, and empowering digital transformation through value stream management. I'm Sam Fell. We have a whole host of amazing speakers joining us on this webinar. Emily, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Emily Brand, and I'm a chief architect at Red Hat, and I specialize in digital transformation and observability strategies for our clients, and I'm based in New York City.
Lovely. Welcome. Colin.
Yeah, Sam. Hey, everybody. My name is Colin Falwell. I'm Director of Observability Strategy at Sumo Logic, where we help customers with their digital transformation, helping organizations shift left and really modernize how they observe and look at everything in the organization and how observability really underpins all of it. And I'm based in Dallas, Texas.
Awesome. And last but not least, Mitch, welcome back.
Thanks, Sam. Great to be with you and Emily and Colin. Mitch Ashley. I am principal with TechStrong Research, and I also serve as CTO for TechStrong Group, the organization that kind of oversees our research analyst business. And it's great to be back. Great topic on observability. Couldn't be better timed than right now. So nice. I'm joining you from Boca Raton. Most of the time I'm out of Colorado. So
yeah, I'm traveling today too. I'm in North Carolina. If there are any North Carolinians out there, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but just say hello. I've already got a few folks who are doing exactly what I was going to be imploring you to do next, which is use the chat. The panelists, the speakers, they will be looking at it. I will be looking at it. I'll be verbalizing questions that come in just to make sure everybody knows how to find it. We've got a few folks already that have said hello. That's fantastic. I'm going to also say hello from North Carolina. And if you want to put your hello in there, we would love to get that chat warmed up and keep that going. Awesome. There's Emily's doing it. Awesome. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colin, who's going to start this conversation on observability-driven design. And then we're going to roll into more of a panel discussion with the folks on the line here. And of course, your questions and comments and suggestions from the chat. So take it away, Colin.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome everyone to today's talk, where we're going to, get into really, talking about what is observability. The world has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, and if you really think about like modern enterprise and digital transformation, value stream management, underpinning all of that is observability. It is not enough to be an organization that is trying to pull in data from all of these islands and silos of data from different vendors, different tools across different lines of business anymore. We're really starting to enter this era of digital enterprise, digital transformation, where we see organizations that are becoming very successful being really robust metrics-driven organizations, and not just metrics, but metrics that are being derived from log data, from customer data, real-time telemetry, through CI/CD pipelines, through all the on-premise and cloud infrastructure, and because of that, you see this acceleration in organizations that are doing this. They're more innovative. They're able to invest in new lines of business, go after new sources of revenue, build new value streams in the organization, or just improve the existing value streams that they have. And we'll certainly dig into that today. But what I want to do is really kind of level set, and set a kind of a high level precedent on observability. And if you think about observability from a fundamentals perspective, if you look at modern industry, you look at commercial aviation, or you look at highly automated manufacturing and supply chains, or you look at the NASA and SpaceX, like all of these systems are designed to be observable. What makes them observable? Well, they're not done after the fact. Observability is really a non-functional set of requirements up front in the design process. Every system, every component, all of the telemetry that is emitted from those things are done in a common way. They're not observable because you've got a lot of different vendors that have logs, metrics, traces, and events being emitted out of all of these components and systems after the fact. They're done up front, and everything that makes these systems reliable is thought about. All of the unknowns. What kind of information do we need out of these systems in order for them to be reliable and dependable? And you are starting to see now, I think, in large measure across the industry. And across industries, you're starting to see finally, I think, the open standards in terms of things like cloud native and open telemetry really starting to unlock the potential for organizations, DevOps teams, business intelligence, data science teams, SRE teams, the business at large, start to rethink about how do we build observability into the fabric of the organization, the enterprise. Whether you're mid-market, whether you're enterprise, it doesn't really matter. If you want to be able to succeed in today's really software-driven intelligence economy, it all comes down to being able to understand all of the telemetry, to normalize it and bring it in such a way that it's actionable in real time. And that's really, I think, the key to what we see in the shift of this kind of the move left, like we did with Agile and test-driven development, shifting left, those sorts of things. Now we're seeing observability-driven development, this shift left of observability into the earliest life cycles of software development. And that's really key for organizations to succeed in this economy that we're in today. So, with that, I want to jump in one level deeper and just kind of talk about intelligent systems and analytics and machine learning, and how is it that we take all of this data and do something with it in a modern environment. Kevin Kelly wrote this book, The Myth of a Superhuman AI. He says that intelligence is a combinatorial continuum. He's talking about machine learning, dispelling the myth of godlike AI, but beyond that, he talks about some of the characteristics of robust machine learning. If you want to have intelligence in data, to be able to bring a bunch of information, if you will, and raise the value of that information and derive intelligence from it, you have to have a domain agnostic data set. It's if you think about all the silos that we have in modern DevOps tool chains, and you are trying to scrape information out of metrics and logs and traces and events from all these different systems, by large measure, that information, by the time you get it into a central place, it's rolled up, it's aggregated, it's lost a lot of the cardinality or the dimensionality. And it's not real fresh. And what he says is that intelligence in machine learning is an emergent property in a horizontal system. In other words, you've got to have nodes in a continuum, and those nodes have to be able to establish high complexity in high dimension. And
I'm
essentially,
going to pause here for a second. And I'm going to ask Mitch, because he's an analyst, and Emily, because she's a chief architect. Do you understand what Colin is saying?
Yeah, I think it's, as you were talking, Colin, are we
I saw a
lacking
light
for
bulb go off, so I wanted to.
Yeah, are we lacking for data, or are we lacking for point me right to the thing I need to know and let me look inside of it to understand what's really going on, right?
In if you think about it in silos, right? What you're lacking is the ability to have a lot of correlation between a lot of data. And you have so many elements. Think about, like, in machine learning today. Think about how many pinpoint tools you have in DevOps tool chains.
Right.
Every one of those is its own element manager. It has its own definition of a node or an entity in the data model. And it's trying to build correlation and causation between data, looking at outliers and those sorts of things in a very narrow set of data. What happens if you put all of that data into one place and you open it up, and now you can look at, one entity that represents the state or the evolution of something over time? It could be software versions being pushed into a container, but the ephemeral nature of things living and dying by the second on deployments and scale up and scale down events. You can still represent that entity as that entity. And now the more dimensionality that you have, the more that you can describe. If I have 5 different ways to describe something, whether it be color or it be versions or it be the assemblies that make up the version that got released, the more of that information that I have at my disposal around a unified entity model, the more correlations I can derive in higher dimensions, the more relationships that I can draw. So the machine learning now has this capability to be far more robust when you collapse all of this into one place and you build unified roadmaps, or not roadmaps, but unified data pipelines that bring all of this together.
Excellent.
Right.
I wanted to add to that too, Sam. You bring up a really good point, Colin. Correlation and causation really aren't the same thing, right? They're kind of two sides of different coins. Because you can correlate a lot of data. We've spent a lot of our careers aggregating things into one pane of glass, one monitoring system, whatever it might be. And of course, now it's trying to take not just how are they tied together, but does A result in something happening in B, right? Do we sell a lot of ice cream because it's Tuesday? No, it's because baseball games are on Tuesday and it's summer, right? That's correlation versus causation.
It's like Freakonomics, right? It's one of my favorite books.
I haven't made a lot of money at that either, but okay.
Right. I know, right?
Not a lot of causation there.
No. I think, and what we see, what I've seen in organizations that are really starting to do this, like data science teams, like everybody's hiring data scientists now. And kind of go to the next screen. Like there's this evolution of value. If you talk about the value of data, right? When we get in and we start talking about the value of data, we have to really understand, like, what does the data hold value to different personas in the organization? And if you think about it, there's a very real sense of, you have these domains of observability and value. In the DevOps space and root cause analysis, SRE, it's all about app, infra, cloud architecture, host metrics, the digital exhaust coming out of all of the systems that you run in an organization. As you move to the right and you start getting into like business intelligence, you get into, digital operations, automated actioning and inside of the organization, really into the service and operations management. Now you're talking about data and information architecture of an organization. It's how do you structure these broader data sets and bring in external data feeds, from all sources, to help establish, a reliable set of data that you can action on and understand the direction of the organization. And then, that lends itself to this architecture of business itself. And within each of these domains, right, essentially what you have is you've got an evolution. There's a level of process maturity that takes place. In DevOps operations, it started with just keeping the lights on. Now it's like infra as code, and it's automation, and it's really building in large measures. It's building the self-service capability for development teams to move faster. Within SRE, it's all about starting and understanding the telemetry, improving reliability, and then mature SRE organizations are really the risk and kind of the governance. They sit between the business and development, and if things become too unstable, there's more risk. They're moving too fast. There's too much change taking place. They're able to spot that and slow things down and recover so that you can then go fast again. And in the middle of all of that is this notion of like capability of process. So when you get into industrial automation or Six Sigma, there's this notion of, capability of process. It describes statistically how capable are your processes. If there are deviations or they're unknowns, can you quickly isolate what those unknowns are and identify them and remediate them? So, this notion of SRE being the reduction of toil and churn and those sorts of things. This is how they do it. It's improving the signal quality. It's really applying scientific principle to the data and making sure that how you collect data is really, really, really honed in on, and standards are applied across the organization in terms of how you do that, right? And that's really hard to do when you have a lot of different tools in the organization and whatnot. Within the BI space, IT service and ops management, it's all about eliminating data silos. And a lot of the BI folks that I talk to and data scientists I talk to, they're like, where's the DevOps teams? Who knows the data the best? I want to go after this information. They want to reduce all of this stuff down. They want to ensure data quality, freshness, accuracy. The all of the dimensions of data quality. And at the maturity of this, it's all, this is where you really get into like business capability analysis, capability of process for the business. How capable are you? What are your value streams? Engineering intelligence, chaos engineering, being able to ensure the survivability in catastrophic events and these sorts of things and whatnot. And all of that kind of leads to the kind of this future state, right? Where if you look at the algorithms, the AI, the machine learning that's taking place in different markets, like just look at the quant analysis and stock markets, like more and more in the future over the course of the next 5 or 10 years, organizations are going to be relying on data intelligence driven through machine learning. And what we'll see in 10 years in the organization hasn't even been invented yet. I mean, think about that, right? And design, asset, observability, intelligence, dependency recognition. It's not going to be KPIs. It's going to really be intelligence driven. Like, here's how you can run all these structural and anomaly analysis and generative modeling to really understand like what are the opportunities and where can I go and increase revenue and reduce risk. So, in all of that, right? Information and observability being the foundation to how you collect this information. It's generic. It's all commodity on the left, and it becomes very specific to the DNA of the organization as it moves to the right, because it continually gets enriched and by the time you get to these initiatives that are driving digital transformation, digital enterprise, the information is very specific and has very high value to the organization. And so with that, I think it's important to like now start to, step back and like break this down. Like, how do you get started? What do you do? What does shifting left? How do you get your arms around building observability into every function of the organization? And with that, I'm going to turn it over here to Emily, and let's start talking about, maybe some of the first things that we can do around just getting your arms around what is the assembly line look like? What does the value stream look like? How do we start to monitor and manage these important facets?
Yeah, exactly. Observability in general it's something that is kind of a new concept, but not at all new, where monitoring, logging, all of those things were around, and people had kind of an overall concept of how their IT infrastructure is doing, but now they really need to get into the nitty-gritty, and a lot more information needs to come from the development side. It can't just be post hoc of the actual deployment. And these are kind of the 4 key measures, 4 key metrics, and honestly, 4 KPIs that all of you should be tracking for your deployments. And lead time for change, that one is pretty straightforward. Time from code committed to deployed to production. I actually have a story about one of my clients in the financial services world, where we went through a metrics-based process mapping with them, MBPM, to figure out, okay, what is your lead time to change and your deployment frequency? And for those of you that don't know MBPM, definitely recommend looking into it to just see, okay, how many people touch a feature change, or when an application is going to go into production the first time. Go through that process to really understand, okay, from a visual aspect, how much work is it to get, let's say, a color change on your website into production. Right. And this is really the first step to get there before you can really convince your organization that moving observability left is important, because otherwise you have to keep going through this exercise, which honestly takes about a day of a lot of people's work.
Right. And just getting to this point, right? So you're talking about observability, but observability of the pipeline is also important. Yeah. And that's what you're talking about here, is understanding, as we're delivering new features and new things, how is that going? It's very meta. Right?
Yes.
You're looking at yourself to say, how am I doing on getting the stuff that I want to observe out? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. And most of the, I'm getting an echo. Mitch, I think you.
I'm going to mute myself also.
Okay, cool. And so with this client, we went through MBPM and really saw, okay, what is your deployment pipeline? Well, that lead time was 4 to 6 weeks. The deployment frequency was 8 to 10 a year, which is extremely low for any type of health of an organization, especially one that's growing. And so from that, we were able to, from help with Red Hat, we were able to get them from 4 to 6 weeks to 1 hour, where their lead time for change. And for the deployment frequency, they went to 8 to 10 per year to 8 to 10 per quarter. And what's really cool about this whole story is that now they're actually tracking these KPIs. And with the MBPM overall, we were able to reduce them from 15 manual touches to 0, which really helps the MTTR and the change failure rate. So to kind of think about the change failure rate, it is not exactly straightforward from the wording, but essentially it's, okay, how many times when you go from dev to QA, does it go back to development? Then it goes back to QA. Okay, then it goes to maybe your pre-prod environment to do load testing. Okay, now it has to go back to development. And that's really what that change failure rate is. And most of your tooling, as long as you're using CI/CD pipelines, can track that today if you have the right hooks in place. And that's really where that shift left really comes into practice.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the other things, that I've seen is you think about, like, I got a graphic, and I should have put it in here, but there's hundreds of different tools in the CI/CD pipeline. And one of the challenges is like normalizing all of that data, finding the primary keys, because one tool may call a pull request one thing and a pull request something else somewhere else, and a commit, and like being able to pull all of that together and have a way to build that continuity and see all of that data aligned. That's a real challenge, and it takes an understanding of all of the telemetry and data that can be admitted. But once you tie all that together, and do the software development optimization, then you can build these real-time dashboards that give you that visibility to look at all of this, regardless of the tool chains that you use. And just it's amazing, like to go from 15 manual touches down to 0. That's phenomenal. Like what an accelerator of innovation that must be for an organization to be able to take that on. And then even if you take like a strangler approach and you do that in kind of the net new model, like let's go build the new pipeline that has all of the automation and all of the telemetry baked in, and being able to monitor the life cycle on all this stuff, and then you start to bring the rest of the organization into that over time. What a compounding effect you get.
Well, Sam, too, building on what you said, Colin, is that we now live in a data-rich world. So we usually think about our development processes as a data-rich world. We think about data for quality, right? Improving bug defects and eliminating defects. And one of the things I wanted to highlight, Emily, that you were talking about is this mean time to recovery idea. We live in a world where security breaches are going to happen. We live in a world where failures are going to be happening. Well, how do you make software more resilient? Well, yeah, you can remove bugs, but there's always going to be bugs. I think it's equally, if not more important, what our ability is to recover. So the first thing to recovery is know what happened and what the source of it is, and build more resilient software to handle those kinds of conditions. So all this emphasis on observability, we kind of have to put the monitoring hat as one of the hats we wear. How do we build resilient software, but how do we build processes that inform us of how to create that software in a new and more resilient way?
Excellent. And I've just put the Strangler pattern, if people aren't familiar with it. I've put a blog post back from a fellow named Martin Fowler, he's pretty big in the DevOps space. He's got a lot of really great thought leadership. And this is from 2004. And it's sort of the idea of breaking down these large systems, one component at a time. So you don't break the whole thing, right? When you're breaking down the monolith. That's amazing. All right. So Emily, are we done with this slide? Should we move into the panel portion? We're already sort of in it. We can't keep these people from speaking, which is awesome. Keep it rolling. I love it. So let's keep it going. So Jim asked a really good question. I think it's going to be covered in this question. So what are the key practices to achieve some of these concepts? So how are we building sort of a holistic approach for observability? We've talked about this a little bit and shifting it left, but what are some practical ways that the folks who are listening can take back to their teams and say, let's get started here? I'm not going to call on anyone. If someone wants to go, raise their hand. Who wants to go first? Mitch,
I always like to go. Mitch. We're all sort of charging horses, wanting to get out of the gate here. I would say two aspects. One is, as we're building more cloud native kinds of applications, more contemporary software, one of the things that we have to start thinking about is not monitoring what's happening from the outside, but looking at what's happening from the inside. And that's where observability comes into for containerized components of applications, service mesh, et cetera. So a lot of this telemetry that we've talked about is helping you point to, well, what is it that this container actually does? And where, while we may have had a situation occur that we want to look into, it may be ephemeral, maybe gone. There may have been 1,000 of them a minute ago, and there's none of them right now. So that data is extremely important. I think so think about your software architectures that you're deploying, and can you get observability? Can you get access to what's happening inside of it that will help you effectively kind of triage and understand that? The second is sort of thinking more systemically about what's happening in the system. You put the strangler pattern up there, Sam. That a lot of that goes back to Goldratt and the goal theory of constraints, and understanding how processes work. And every time we have a handoff, that creates delay. Where do we fix things? We fix things at the bottleneck. So if you're looking at places to start, find the thing not necessarily as the lowest hanging fruit, but find the thing that's holding everything up to be able to figure out where the problem is. Mm-hmm. And it may be way down in the process, maybe early on. But if you fix things before the bottleneck, all you do is make things arrive at the bottleneck faster. If you fix things after the bottleneck, it starves because there's no things to work on. So go find that bottleneck, if you will, in your process, and then it'll move as you work each of the issues. And that
you'll find really another bottleneck for sure. Exactly. Once you clear one up, you're going to find another one. That's true. Yeah.
You know, we've got customers that are, really, really starting to embrace open telemetry. And, I think even I was for a time, we're so used to APM and tracing, and the way that kind of the classic or legacy APM worked, that we think open telemetry is just the modern version of that. But we've got customers now, that are doing things with open telemetry that, I was like, wow, you can do that with open telemetry. Like, you think about it, it's not just the auto instrumentation and the things that you can get inside of various different languages. It's a framework. And because it's a framework and it's a set of standards, you can do all sorts of things with open telemetry, in terms of just monitoring lifecycle that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do with quote unquote APM agent. Yes, you can go in and you can instrument frameworks, and you can you can emit all of this signals that come out, but you can also leverage the trace IDs and the ability of the span IDs to be able to tag all of the life cycle things that are happening inside your CI/CD pipeline across broader elements. So, like, if you think about lean, agile value stream analysis, where you're looking at lead time and lag time, and how much does it take to go from this, if you're measuring kind of like every turn that you go through a process, we've got customers that are instrumenting the entire process in value streams, from decision making processes that span days, not just hours or minutes, like processes that span days and in some cases weeks. And you can customize these frameworks to do things like link and tie multiple life cycle things together, and then zoom out and really look at a long-term big picture of like the overall health of that process that goes from day 1 to day 10, for example. And it's really opened my eyes to just the value of it. And there's other things that I think make me super excited about open telemetry in particular, and that is that because it is open framework, it's an open standard, it's open contributable. It's accelerating very quickly in terms of standardization, and it's so lightweight in the cloud, and you're not tied to vendors anymore. It
allows your organization to lean into it.
Yeah, you can lean
into a vendor, right?
You can shift. Yeah, you can shift all of this left into the developer ecosystem, and you get this rich set of combined telemetry. The open telemetry collector is this beautiful Swiss Army knife that does all the enrichment in the pipeline. So logs, metrics, traces, events, all this stuff is neatly bundled together and put into a single data stream. And you're not dealing with proprietary agentry. You can extend this however you want to. You can do any kind of pre-processed machine learning analytics and enrichment that you want to do, customize it any way that you want to. And if you want to point that to a different vendor tomorrow, you could have it going to 3 vendors at the same time. It doesn't really matter. Right. And organizations that are doing this, that are investing in this, like, they're now, for the first time, from now on, they'll own all of that themselves. They don't, if they want to go through a state of evolutionary maturity or innovation around the type of telemetry or how they get it,
It's not a rip and replace.
It's not a rip and replace anymore. That's right.
They're building something. They're iterating the same way
That's
they're
right.
building software. Now they're building observability.
Exactly.
It's beautiful.
Exactly.
It's a great thing. Emily, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I would say the main thing that any organization has to watch out for, really having an observable infrastructure is to measure what matters. I have talked to so many clients where I ask, hey, why don't you actually track any of this in terms of those 4 data sets at the least, or just start to monitor your dev environment, any of that, and they completely refuse because of the fact that their alerting standards and all of that in production are the same all the way down to development. So they're not actually measuring what matters in each of their environments or each of their product sets even. And yeah, so then no one wants to actually hook into any monitoring solution because there's this set alerting where everyone gets emails and people are like, oh my God, development's down. This is going to be the worst thing ever. And just like, it's not down and it's not the worst thing ever.
Right.
It's okay. Like, this is where things are supposed to break, or in a lab environment or any of that. And so really making sure that you are paying attention to the right KPIs for your organization, and also really kind of leaning into any mistakes to make sure that people are doing reflection of, oh, this actually was a mistake. We need to do better. And if you're doing that not on a customer-facing environment, then your likelihood of having reliable software in the customer-facing environment is so much stronger. And so much of observability that I've seen, and the reason why we don't do it well as corporations, is because of just fear of people being able to see it. No one wants to share their mistakes.
Ooh, this is a really good topic. This could be the whole rest of our conversation. But I'm not, because that's huge, right? Fear, having a trust-based culture, all these things. It's growth mindset, not punitive mindset. That's kind of the way you need to be walking into this sort of conversation. That's such a great point, Emily. One of the things. Sorry. Go ahead, Mitch.
No. I was just going to say, Emily, part of what measuring up matters, one definition of that is measure what things you're going to do something about. In other words, it's sort of like don't ask a question if you aren't going to do anything with the answer, right?
That's
Same for metrics. And we suffer with too much data. We can easily suffer with too many metrics. So measure the things that you're going to take action on. Right. If it doesn't matter after a while, you kind of can ignore that, right? Or set it aside. And this is now more important.
Yep.
Yeah, something you said the other day, Emily, we were talking, metrics. What did you say? Metrics lead to culture.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah, can you maybe dive into that just a little bit?
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it depends on what you're tracking and what you're incentivized on as an organization and as an individual. If you're paid on having 5 nines and everything has to be up all the time, well, then you're not going to change anything. You're not going to improve anything, because the only thing that you care about is that nothing goes down. And so even if your customers need something more, if you even need security updates, you're going to hesitate to do those. And I deal with so many organizations where they don't even patch their CVEs within any reasonable time set because their SLAs are so absurd, where it's like, no, we need to talk about this. And if that's really the case, we need to re-architect these applications to make them still be available, maybe not with all of the same services, but still available for government or HIPAA regulations, things like that. And so that's really where we need to change our own mindset and our own culture of also measure what matters, incentivize what matters.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that is really one of the big challenges I see as well. Talking to a lot of organizations, there's just so much political fear
Mhm.
and what is this data? Who's going to see this data? What are they what are they going to do with it? How's it going to reflect on me?
Right.
Whereas, if you look at like, kind of the modern SRE, like blameless postmortems, like we all know everything is there's going to be problems.
There's going to be problems.
There's going to be problems,
Yeah.
right? We
And
live
guess
in.
what? A lot of the problems that are here probably predate you.
That's right.
So you don't have to own them all, but what
That's
you
right.
can do is you could be a steward and you could make them better.
Mhm,
And the good
mhm.
news is if the numbers are completely abysmal right now, what a great opportunity for you. Holy
Yes.
cow, right?
Yeah. Let's all be heroes of the
So
data,
yeah,
right?
lean into that. It's hard.
Yeah.
I asked a question in the chat because I think this is a really important one, is what kind of culture do you have around these metrics? And again, back to what Emily was saying, are you trying to punish people with it, or are you learning from them? And so
Mhm.
that's a question to ask yourself, and to have your organization ask itself, because that starts at the top and comes down.
Mhm.
If people who are doing the work are afraid to tell you what's going on, you won't find out until
Mhm.
it's too late.
Mhm. Mhm.
So transparency in most things is really, really helpful.
Mhm.
When there's a concept of data wins. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of our conversations, the fear-based part of it is what people are saying, their opinion, their beliefs, their, whatever, their understanding of what might be happening. And data is pretty neutral. Now, data can be used against you too. And so the way to help address that is first concentrate on what is the data, and then B, let's work together on interpreting that and come together on a shared understanding of teasing apart why is this the way it is. Okay, and that can lead to that sort of non-blame postmortem, or that non-blame kind of dialogue, because you may not have the full picture even if you have access to the data. It's working with the developer, the security team, the operations team, the cloud provider, whatever it might be, the business partner. There's lots of ways or reasons, factors that may be leading to why the state is saying what it is. But the point being is, just like the customer is always right, sort of the data wins, and it can take the power and the bullying out of the conversation.
Right. If you just lean into the data and say, here's where we are, and we would like to try and get 5% better next month, then that's where you are. That's great.
Almost every manager wants to say, I'm data driven. We're a data driven organization, even if they're not. Well, help them be one, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So
that is
difficult. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that. It is organizations that are growing and are taking market share and are becoming the names we recognize. These are the organizations that monetize data. They are capable of taking all of this information and doing something with it. And it's not about fear. It's about how do we take all of this information and structure it in a way and that we can leverage it to
make
better the
ourselves better,
organization,
make
and
our
that's
product
right.
better, whatever. Yeah. If you're not evolving and leaning, then you are going to die, basically. So Rick asked sort of a technical kind of question. I don't know if that's something that we can cover here, but what do I need to do to my apps to get observability in a .NET Azure environment? Is that an open telemetry thing? Is that
there's certainly open telemetry for .NET. There's auto instrumentation frameworks. It's an easy shim to install. You work with your vendor of choice.
you can download Sumo Logic for free.
Can.
Go ahead and give it a
Yes.
try.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
plug in that,
You can go through Red Hat Marketplace and we have a fantastic partnership that really streamlines and makes it easy to do all of this. But it's cloud to cloud. It's APIs. It's the telemetry that emits from within your application. I would say observability. Understand that observability. You start with understanding what does the business need. Go have lunch with your CTO, your CFO, your CEO. Put together a governance panel within the organization, a governance committee that works on what is the information that the organization needs out of this data. What kind of customer information do we need? What kind of telemetry do we need out of these applications? Yes, logging, definitely. Logging, metrics, traces. Open Telemetry is going to do all of the stitching for you. So you're going to get all the transactional stuff, real user monitoring, front end focused, right? End to end, you're going to see bottlenecks. You're going to see all of that. And it's automatically going to correlate to all the logs. So you'll get a temporal analysis of all that data and tied to all the metrics. And it does that very nicely. It weaves all the together into a single stream of data. Which then you can pump into Sumo. And Emily, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the capabilities of how all this works within say OpenShift, if you're leveraging those sorts of things as well in the hybrid and cloud world. But
yeah, we could go on forever designing the solution. But the one thing I want to make clear as well is, one, as a developer, you need to actually expose information to Open Telemetry or whatever monitoring tool that you're using. So it's not just logging, for sure. And the other piece is also you need to have self-reflection in terms of whether that's your product owner, your business owner, of understanding, okay, what needs to be real-time data and what needs to just be historical data. Where should the data go and who cares about it? So that's really conversations that need to happen in that design phase, or if you're already in the middle of development, then go and have those conversations now, because it's no different than understanding what security, what regulation need to happen for an application. So much more with the whole shift left thing, so much more is falling onto the developers, to be honest. And so as a developer, you kind of need to wear all the hats, or at least know who wears the right hats to ask the right questions.
The red hats.
The red hats.
The red hat. That's the hat we want, right?
That's the hat we want.
That's great. So I want to correct myself, because I said that you can download Sumo Logic. I'm used to working at big old clunky enterprise software companies from the before 4 times. It's not a download. It's a total SaaS-based service. Go and check that out.
Yeah.
But that's getting started the way Emily's talking about, shifting that stuff left. Rick asked, so we add logging. Yeah, you can do logging for sure, but adding those metrics, right? There's a framework that you can plug right in with Sumo to get a lot of metrics. And then the service calls. I assume you're talking about mapping the different calls that are being made within your microservices or the different things. And that's handled automatically also. Once you've inserted the Open Telemetry agent, you get that comes with it.
SDK.
The SDK, excuse me.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's so much in that, right? When you use the right telemetry for the right use cases, like we talked about it a little bit earlier. I think Mitch and Emily brought it up, like understanding, what to measure. Why are you measuring something? Why are you monitoring something? You have to really think about the underpinning use cases that make up what you're doing. Everything should be purpose driven, in the sense that I'm going to use logs for these use cases. I'm going to use metrics for these use cases. I'm going to use tracing for these use cases. If you try to do too much with just, say, logs, if you want to get service calls and these sorts of things, right? If you're doing info level logging to get counts, that's not the way to do it. You want to leverage tracing for those use cases to get, the number of calls that are going to different APIs and those sorts of things. And then leverage logs for like the debug and the really verbose stuff to really understand the root cause and why things are happening, in that regard. Metrics, everything is metrics driven. So metrics are the most efficient upfront way to monitor the state of things, and how you drive metrics are important. If you have a metric that has 8 standard deviations between the lowest value and the highest value, it's not going to be a very relevant metric for you, most likely. It's not going to be deterministic. You're not going to be able to understand why that metric deviates from the highs to the lows. So you've got to figure out, how do I make metrics have tight performance corridors? They're predictable. I can understand a deviation. I know under these circumstances, what these metrics should be doing, and I can quickly validate that. And that's all done with rigor and process and pipeline and automation, and how you performance test, and are you break testing when you performance test. There's so much that you can go into there to really drive high capability of process in your data.
I want to talk about the shift left part of this. Someone was asking, well, does that mean just the developer is going to do everything? I think that might have been an early mindset of DevOps, of, let's not have ops, let's not have all these other things. The developers will take care of it or automate it. So a lot of what shift left means is design in observability. So think about your software architecture and your Azure environment or Red Hat, however you're architecting your applications, because just logging alone is not enough. You might not have the right information. So that's not going to help you much. But if you know that we need in our container orchestration layer, that we need to know when things happen, when these errors occur, what kind of communications is happening, what kind of APIs are being used for those communications, what are the configurations at the time something might have happened. Well, those are things you got to know before they happen. So that's part of shifting left. And the question also was about, how do you start that mindset? So you don't design a car for what it's going to be when it rolls off the factory line. You design a car for what it's going to be like when you drive it on the highway and in the city, and you park it in the parking lot, etc. So same thing with software and how you design an observability. How are we going to do those things? And that's going to be more than a developer mindset. That's going to be an operations, an SRE, someone who is responsible for service and responding to resiliency issues or customer calls, et cetera. That's where we can collaborate to design in observability up front.
And Jim asked a question of where can I go? I think maybe it's more of the cultural. Jim, I don't know if you can add another thing on it. Is that more on the cultural side aspects of observability that you're wanting to get your team going, or is it basically just observability in general? The DevOps Institute, which happens to be part of the TechStrong group, recently, which is amazing, under Jane Grohl. She's just amazing. They have lots of trainings and certifications for DevOps and observability, and that's a really, really great place to start. They're doing right now in the process of doing a survey, a skill up survey. They're 100% focused on making sure the humans of DevOps are getting what they need, right? We iterate our technology all the time. Let's iterate our people. Right?
Yeah,
people are your most valuable resource, not a computer, not a program. It's a person.
Yeah, I think so many for so long have thought about observability as a technology thing, or a technology problem, or a technology solution. It's a people and process thing. 100%. It is all about culture and culture of experimentation and learning, and celebrating that whole failure, and failing forward, failing fast, moving quickly, that culture, it has to take root in an organization and proliferate and grow. And you need coaches, you need content, you need leadership that is willing to embrace that. And changing culture can be a challenge, but it also can be highly rewarding in organizations to embrace that and go forward with it.
Yeah, and the other thing to being a developer, make them care by giving them ownership. So if they have to own QA changes, and they have to be out on those Saturday night from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. calls, and it's not just a pre-prod and this QA team that they threw it over the wall to, and they're the ones that are actually responsible, whereas they could have just put in some metrics and thought of observability first, so that then when that was in test, they could find a lot of these issues. It's not really much different than test-driven development. If you have ownership as a developer on things going forward, and you also feel the impact, then you're going to care a lot more. And also, just being able to visualize your technical debt at the very least, of making that very obvious to developers where they could have made a difference earlier so that then they wouldn't feel overworked. There's just so many little things where it kind of all comes down to observability, where if they can see the impact that they're having one way or the other, it changes people's mindset and makes them feel a lot more autonomous, which is so important.
They can see their impact.
Yeah, you have to communicate, right? You have to say, look, this is what we're going to measure, and this is where we're going. This is what we're striving for, and this is the impact it's going to have, and this is how it's going to improve the lives of everybody in the organization, because nobody wants to be burned out. Everybody wants work-life balance. Everybody wants to be able to innovate and improve things, not just, continue this drudge through this reactive state of existence. And you want to free up that time. And there's a lot of techniques and strategies that you can employ organizationally within dev teams to handle on calls and to engineer your way out of this reactive place that you're in with data. But it starts with being able to say, here's what we're going to improve. This is the life cycle of this, and we're going to successively get better, and we're going to transform the organization through information and this data that we're going to monitor. Yeah.
So we got 4 minutes left. I've got 4 names that I need to read of people who have randomly won a $25 gift certificate.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I can't randomly just read my name off 4 times. I've already been told by the person who organizes this thing. So that's unfortunate. But before I do that, last words about observability-driven design and helping people understand that shift. Colin, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask everybody to keep it a little bit short.
Yeah, sure. Embrace open standards. If you're highly siloed and you have multiple lines of business, or even one, you've just got lots of different tools in there. Look at how difficult is it to get data out. Can you own your own telemetry? If you can't, start that journey. It's an evolution. It's going to take time. Use the strangler approach. Build the net new way of doing things. Model it out, figure out what that looks like, and then start bringing everything into that new way of doing things. And make it so compelling and so great that everybody wants to do it. Right. But own it. Right. Own it. Start now if you haven't. Because everybody's going to be there.
Dial the number. All right, Colin, I need to move on to the next person. Emily, I'm going to go to you.
Okay, I'm going to go real short with just a question. How do you manage a system you can't see? And that's it. That's my final.
What's the sound of one hand clapping? Is that the kind of thing? Is this a haiku or something? That's awesome. I love it. That was a lot shorter. Colin, I can give you a couple extra seconds.
What does success in observability look like for you?
That's right. That's another great question. Absolutely.
I thought you were going to say call 1-800. Operators are standing by.
That's right. Exactly. Dial the number.
Well, I'll stick with the short theme. The hardest part is getting started. Just pick a point and start, even if it's the wrong point. Don't worry about being right. You may not have the bottleneck. Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. But success breeds success. You'll bring people along with you, and you're all learning together. So don't worry about it. It's not being about the smartest person. Just get started.
Exactly. I love that.
Great.
Awesome.
Thanks, Mitch.
Well, this has been such a fantastic discussion. Some really engaging content. A lot of great questions and comments from the audience. I appreciate that. The folks who have won the $25 webinar Amazon gift certificates, I believe they're Amazon, Justin W., Pedro R., Paul F., and James R. So to all of you, thank you for showing up. For all of you who didn't get some money, we also appreciate you showing up, and hopefully you've gotten some value out of this beyond the $25 to everybody. On behalf of TechStrong and Red Hat and Sumo Logic, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.